The last sliver of sun, a bruised plum against the horizon, bled its final hues across the ancient stones of the villa. Ilara watched it from the arched window of her study, a silent witness to the daily surrender of light. The air, still warm from the day's embrace, carried the scent of jasmine and cypress, a rich, heady perfume that clung to the evening. She breathed it in, a sigh escaping her lips, tinged with a delicate blend of longing and anticipation. This was her favorite time of day, this velvet dusk, when the world softened its edges and secrets seemed to whisper from the shadows. Tonight, however, the twilight held an added resonance, a hum beneath her skin that had nothing to do with the fading light, and everything to do with the man who would soon arrive. She turned from the window, letting the gathering gloom embrace the room. There was no need for lamps yet. The dying light suited her mood, casting familiar objects in a romantic, almost ethereal glow. Her fingers brushed over the spine of a leather-bound book, then traced the cool curve of a marble sculpture on her desk. Every surface, every texture, seemed heightened, alive with a subtle energy. She had chosen her attire with unusual care, not for ostentation, but for comfort, and a certain unspoken promise. A dress of deep emerald silk, its fabric a whisper against her skin, clinging in places, flowing in others. It was simple, yet undeniably sensual, the kind of garment that invited touch, even as it suggested a quiet elegance. Her hair, usually a wild cascade, was gathered loosely at the nape of her neck, a few tendrils escaping to frame her face. She hadn't bothered with much jewelry, just a pair of small pearl earrings, their luminescence catching the lust of the light. She wanted nothing to distract from the raw truth of herself, from the quiet storm brewing within. Julian. His name was a soft echo in her mind, a chord struck deep within her chest. They had known each other for years, a friendship forged in shared passions, intellectual sparring, and a quiet, undeniable current that had always run beneath the surface of their camaraderie. But lately that current had grown into a tide, pulling them closer, making the unspoken almost unbearable. A look held too long, a hand brushing hers, an unexpected closeness that had left her breathless and yearning for more. Tonight was different. She felt it in the charged air, in the way her heart fluttered like a trapped bird. Tonight the unspoken would surely find its voice. A soft chime from the entrance hall stirred her from her reverie. He was here. A tremor, delicate as a butterfly's wing, passed through her. She took a slow, deep breath, centering herself, trying to quell the sudden rush of heat that bloomed in her cheeks. She was not a girl to be flustered, not Ilara with her calm demeanor and sharp intellect. Yet Julian had always possessed the power to unravel her with a single glance. She walked towards the sound, her silk dress rustling softly, a low murmur in the quiet house. The hallway was dimmer than her study, the shadows deeper, clinging to the ancient tapestries and the dark, polished wood. As she approached the main entrance, she saw him through the ornate glass of the front door, a silhouette against the fading light, impossibly tall, impossibly elegant. The house staff, discreet as always, had already let him in. He stood in the entrance hall, removing his jacket, the movement fluid and graceful. His back was to her, but she recognized the familiar breadth of his shoulders, the dark gleam of his hair. He turned slowly, as if sensing her presence, and their eyes met across the dim space. Julian. He was a man sculpted from shadows and light, with eyes the color of aged whiskey and a smile that rarely reached them fully, but when it did, it was devastating. Tonight his smile was soft, a private invitation that made her stomach clench with a delicious ache. He wore a dark shirt, unbuttoned at the throat, revealing a hint of tanned skin, and tailored trousers that hugged his lean frame. He looked effortlessly sophisticated, undeniably potent. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the quiet hall, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. "Julian," she replied, her voice a little breathy, betraying the composure she tried to project. She moved towards him, a subtle sway to her hips, her eyes never leaving his. He took a step forward, then another, closing the distance between them. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an invisible current. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the emerald silk, then rising to meet her eyes again. A flicker of raw appreciation, of something deeper, passed through his gaze. "You look exquisite," he said, the words a low thrum against the backdrop of the dying light. A blush, hot and undeniable, spread across her cheeks. "And you, Julian, look as if you've stepped from a dream." He chuckled softly, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "A dream, perhaps, that I've been waiting to wake up to." The double meaning hung in the air, a silken thread binding them. He extended a hand, not to touch her, not yet, but to gesture towards the living room. "Shall we?" She nodded, her heart thrumming a frantic rhythm. As she walked past him, a faint scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something subtly spicy, enveloped her, intoxicating and familiar. It was a scent that had haunted her dreams more than once. The living room was even grander, yet more intimate, than the hall. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the high ceilings and the rich jewel-toned furnishings. Two armchairs, upholstered in deep sapphire velvet, faced each other before the fireplace, a low table between them, bearing a decanter of amber liquid, and two crystal glasses. Julian moved with an easy grace, walking to the table. "Whiskey," he offered, his back to her, but she felt his awareness of her, a palpable pull. "Perfect," she managed, sinking into one of the velvet armchairs. The fabric felt impossibly soft against her skin, a luxurious caress. She watched him pour, his hands strong and elegant, the liquid catching the firelight like liquid gold. He brought her a glass, the crystal cool against her fingertips, the whiskey warm and fragrant. Their fingers brushed as she took it, a spark, brief and electric, passing between them. He settled into the opposite armchair, turning to face her fully, his long legs stretched out towards the fire. The silence that fell between them was not awkward, but heavy with unspoken emotions, with years of shared history, and a blossoming new chapter. The fire crackled, the whiskey glowed, and the world outside the villa dissolved into the velvet night. "It's been a long week," Elara said, breaking the spell, though she almost regretted it. She took a sip of the whiskey, letting its warmth spread through her. It was smooth, rich and potent, much like the man across from her. "Indeed," Julian agreed, his gaze fixed on her. "I found myself counting the hours until this evening." Her heart skipped. He was always so direct, so unapologetically honest in his desires, and it both thrilled and unnerved her. "Have you?" she asked, her voice a little breathy again. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his eyes dark and intense, holding hers captive. "More than you know, Elara. More than I've admitted even to myself, until recently." The heat in the room seemed to intensify, generated not by the fire, but by the unspoken confession in his words. She felt a flush rise again, but this time it wasn't embarrassment. It was a deep, thrilling warmth that spread through her veins. "And what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Have you admitted to yourself?" He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers, as if savoring the moment, prolonging the delicious tension. "That I've been a fool," he finally said, his voice low and rich. "A fool to let so much time pass. To pretend that the connection between us was merely friendship, merely intellectual sparring." Elara's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment she had both yearned for and feared. The tipping point. "And you, Elara?" he prompted, his voice a soft challenge, a velvet demand. "Have you admitted anything to yourself?" She met his gaze, refusing to look away, unwilling to back down from the intensity that now crackled between them. Her fingers tightened around her glass. "Perhaps," she murmured, "that I've been equally foolish, perhaps more so." A slow smile, genuinely warm, spread across his face, reaching his eyes this time, crinkling the corners. It was a smile that promised secrets, pleasures, and a depth of connection she had only dreamed of. He set his glass down on the low table, the crystal clinking softly. Then, with a deliberate slowness that made her heart pound, He reached across the space separating their chairs. His hand, warm and strong, settled on her knee, his thumb beginning a slow, rhythmic stroke against the silk of her dress. A jolt like liquid fire shot through her. Her breath hitched, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. The silk, thin and delicate, offered no barrier to the heat of his touch, to the sudden undeniable yearning that flared to life within her. His eyes, still locked with hers, were dark pools reflecting the firelight, burning with an intensity that mirrored her own. "I've wanted to do that," he said, his voice a low, husky whisper, "for a very long time." Her hand, as if with a will of its own, trembled as it reached out, her fingers just brushing the back of his hand on her knee. His skin was warm, smooth, a stark contrast to the rough fabric of his shirt sleeve. The simple touch was an electric current, a spark igniting a wildfire. "I know," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I felt it too." His thumb continued its sensual dance on her knee, moving higher, just a fraction, along her inner thigh. The silk whispered in protest, but her skin hummed in delighted anticipation. The world outside the circle of firelight and their shared gaze faded into insignificance. All that existed was the warmth of his hand, the burning intensity of his eyes, and the dizzying realization that this moment, this velvet dusk, was only the beginning. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a seductive murmur that seemed to vibrate directly inside her. "Ilara," he breathed, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Are you ready to stop pretending?" Her breath caught, held captive in her chest. Her mind, usually so sharp and logical, was now a swirling vortex of sensation and desire. All she could do was nod, a slight, almost imperceptible movement, but one that spoke volumes. His smile deepened, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. He moved his hand from her knee, tracing a path upwards along her thigh, over the emerald silk, until his fingers reached the hem of her dress. Then, with exquisite slowness, he slid his hand beneath the fabric, against the bare skin of her leg. A gasp, sharper this time, escaped her. The warmth of his palm against her bare skin was electrifying, sending shivers through her entire body. She leaned back against the velvet, her head tilting back slightly, exposing the delicate curve of her throat. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite sensation. When she opened them again, his face was closer, his eyes darker, filled with a raw, undeniable hunger that sent a thrill through her. His fingers continued their slow, deliberate caress, tracing patterns on her inner thigh. Each touch a promise, a soft exploration. "You feel like silk and fire," he murmured, his voice husky, his gaze never leaving hers. "Just as I imagined." Her own fingers, still trembling, curled into the soft velvet of the armchair. She wanted to lean into his touch, to press herself closer, to abandon herself to the intoxicating sensations he was so skillfully evoking. The romantic tension had built to an almost unbearable crescendo, a taut string ready to snap. He shifted in his chair, leaning even closer, his other hand coming up to cup her jaw, his thumb gently stroking the sensitive skin beneath her ear. The dual touch, one hand on her thigh, the other on her face, was overwhelming, exquisitely sensual. "Ilara," he whispered, his eyes searching hers, asking permission, offering a silent question. She didn't need words. Her answer was in the slight parting of her lips, the quickening of her breath, the desperate longing reflected in her eyes. She wanted him. She had always wanted him. He lowered his head, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to protest. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing again as her lips parted in silent invitation. The first touch of his lips was soft, tentative, a feather-like brush that sent a shiver through her. It was a question, an exploration, a delicate dance of anticipation. Then, as if sensing her readiness, her hunger, his lips pressed more firmly. A gentle demand, a promise of the passion that had simmered between them for so long. It was a kiss born of years of unspoken desire, of stolen glances and imagined touches. It was deep and slow, a leisurely exploration, a soft claiming. His mouth was warm, firm, tasting of whiskey, and something uniquely him, something intoxicating and utterly addictive. Her fingers, released from the velvet, instinctively reached up, threading themselves into the soft, dark hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss. His hand on her thigh moved higher, sliding further beneath the silk, tracing the delicate curve of her hip, while his thumb continued its insistent, erotic dance against her skin. The other hand, still cupping her jaw, tilted her head to better meet his kiss, his thumb now stroking the sensitive line of her jaw, sending tremors of pleasure through her. The fire crackled, casting long dancing shadows around them, creating a private world where only their two bodies, their two souls, existed. The velvet dusk outside deepened, embracing the villa. But within, a new dawn of passion was breaking, hot and blinding. She felt herself melting, dissolving into the exquisite sensation, her body humming with a deep, resonant pleasure. Her mind was a dizzying blur, focused only on the feel of his lips, the scent of his skin, the intoxicating rhythm of his touch. He broke the kiss, pulling back just slightly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the charged air. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, gazed into hers, reflecting a passion that mirrored her own, a raw, beautiful hunger. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice rough with desire. "This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning." His words, a low, husky promise, vibrated through Ilara, igniting a tremor that started deep in her core and rippled outward. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat echoing the furious pulse in her ears. She could only gaze back into his eyes, a silent question, a desperate plea for him to make good on his word. His thumb stroked lightly over her cheekbones, sending shivers through her skin, a delicate counterpoint to the powerful desire thrumming beneath. He didn't move away entirely, but shifted, letting his lips brush hers once more, a feather-light contact that was almost more potent than the fierce kiss that had preceded it. It was a tease, a slow, deliberate reawakening of her senses. Ilara whimpered softly, a sound she barely recognized as her own, and leaned into his touch, her body aching for closer contact. "Indeed," she whispered, her voice a reedy breath, barely audible even to herself. The word felt inadequate, a pale shadow of the tempest raging within her. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips, a dangerous, alluring tilt that promised exquisite delights. He dipped his head again, and this time, the kiss was a slow exploration, a deep languid dance of lips and tongues that stole her breath, and every coherent thought. He tasted of wine and something uniquely him, a heady masculine scent that was both earthy and clean. Her hands, which had been clutching the silk of his shirt, now slid up, tracing the strong column of his neck, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape. She pulled him closer, desperate to eliminate every millimeter of space between them. The kiss deepened, becoming an intimate conversation without words, a language of passion understood only by their intertwined bodies. His lips moved over hers with a practiced tenderness, a careful pressure that coaxed her own mouth to open wider, to invite him in. His tongue swept inside, a warm, silken caress that sent a dizzying spiral of pleasure through her. Ilara responded without hesitation, her own tongue meeting his, mirroring his rhythm, exploring the soft contours of his mouth. A low groan rumbled in his chest, a sound that thrilled her to her core, a confirmation of the mutual fire that consumed them. His hands, which had been resting on her waist, began to move, slowly, deliberately. They traced the curve of her spine, pressing her closer still, until the soft fabric of her dress was crushed between their bodies. His touch was a brand, leaving a trail of heat in its wake. He moved up, his fingers brushing the delicate straps of her gown, lingering for a moment at the hollow of her throat, before sliding back down, cupping the soft swell of her hips. Ilara gasped into his mouth, arching into his touch, her body a live wire humming with a pleasure so intense it was almost pain. He broke the kiss again, reluctantly, his breath ragged against her cheek. His dark eyes, still heavy with desire, held hers captive. "You are exquisite, Ilara," he murmured, his voice a rough whisper that was like a caress itself. "Every inch of you." His gaze dropped to her mouth, still swollen and glistening from their shared passion, then traced a path down her throat, lingering on the pulse beating wildly at its base, before moving lower, to the gentle curve of her collarbone. She felt a flush spread across her chest, a heat that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the sheer intensity of his regard. His hands, still at her waist, began to move with a new intention. Slowly, carefully, his fingers found the delicate row of buttons that ran down the back of her gown. Ilara held her breath, her senses acutely aware of every subtle shift, every soft rustle of fabric. The first button came undone with a gentle pop, a tiny sound that echoed loudly in the charged silence of the room. Then another, and another. Each release was a small gasp of air against her skin, a tantalizing promise of what was to come. He worked with a deliberate slowness that was both maddening and utterly intoxicating. She felt the cool air seep in as the fabric began to loosen, the silk pooling slightly at her lower back. His fingertips brushed against her bare skin as he unfastened each button, sending a fresh wave of shivers through her. It wasn't just the physical sensation, it was the intimacy of the act, the unspoken communication of permission and desire. She leaned into him, letting him take the lead, completely trusting in his gentle touch. When the last button was undone, he didn't immediately pull the dress away. Instead, his hands slid underneath the loosened fabric, pressing against the small of her back, warming her skin with his touch. He held her there, suspended in a moment of exquisite anticipation, his eyes never leaving hers. A silent question hung in the air, a final offering of choice, though her body had long since made its decision. With a soft sigh of surrender, Ilara leaned her head back against his shoulder, exposing the elegant curve of her neck. "Please," she breathed, the word a plea and an invitation, her body trembling with a desire so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. He responded by pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the sensitive skin just behind her ear, then trailed his lips down the column of her neck, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. Her skin tingled, alive under his touch. His hands moved, gently pushing the silk off her shoulders. The dress slid down, a whisper of fabric against her skin, pooling around her waist. She felt the cool air on her bare shoulders, a delicious contrast to the heat radiating from his body. He paused, his hands still at her waist, his gaze sweeping over her exposed back, the delicate curve of her shoulder blades. She felt utterly vulnerable, yet utterly desired. Then, with a gentle tug, he let the dress fall entirely, a silken pool at her feet. She stood before him in her delicate lace chemise and matching drawers, the sheer fabric doing little to conceal the rising flush on her skin, the quickening pulse in her throat. His eyes, dark and intense, devoured every inch of her, a silent appreciation that made her feel beautiful, cherished, and utterly adored. "Magnificent," he breathed, his voice a low rumble in his chest. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace along the neckline of her chemise, then followed the curve of her breast, the warmth of his touch seeping through the sheer fabric. Ilara's breath hitched in her throat, her nipples hardening beneath the lace, aching for his touch. She reached for him then, her fingers going to the buttons of his shirt, a reciprocal desire to strip away the barriers between them. Her hands, though trembling slightly, were surprisingly steady as she undid each button, revealing the expanse of his chest, the taut muscles, the dark, swirling hair. He watched her, a slow, sensual smile playing on his lips, his eyes sparkling with an intensity that mirrored her own. When the last button was undone, she pushed the fabric back from his shoulders, her fingers brushing against the warm skin of his collarbones. The shirt, like her dress, slid down, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, the powerful shoulders, the strong lines of his arms. He was magnificent, a sculpted masterpiece of muscle and sinew, radiating a primal strength that both thrilled and intimidated her. She had seen strong men, but none with such an effortless grace, such a captivating presence. Her hands, no longer shy, splayed across his chest, feeling the heat of his skin, the powerful beat of his heart beneath her palms. His skin was smooth, warm, and utterly captivating. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his sternum, tasting the salt and musk of his skin. He groaned softly, a sound of deep pleasure that resonated through her. He lifted her then, his hands sliding under her thighs, effortlessly sweeping her into his arms. Ilara gasped, wrapping her legs instinctively around his waist, her arms circling his neck. She pressed her face into the crook of his neck, inhaling his intoxicating scent, feeling the hard planes of his chest against her lace-clad breasts. He carried her to the bed, the soft mattress a welcoming embrace. He lowered her gently onto the silken sheets, never breaking eye contact, his gaze a burning flame that promised endless delights. The cool silk whispered against her bare back as she lay down, her body humming with a delicious anticipation. He followed her down, supporting himself on his forearms, hovering over her, his eyes still locked with hers. The air between them crackled with an unspoken energy, a palpable tension that was both exquisite and almost unbearable. "Beautiful," he whispered again, his voice raw with emotion. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a tender, lingering kiss that was a promise of deeper intimacy. His body pressed against hers, the thin barrier of her chemise and his trousers doing little to dampen the heat that flared between them. She felt the hard length of him against her, and a deep ache bloomed low in her belly, a yearning for release she had never known. His hands, warm and strong, moved to the hem of her chemise. Slowly, meticulously, he began to roll it up, inch by agonizing inch, revealing the smooth curve of her stomach, the gentle dip of her navel. Ilara arched into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed as a wave of pure sensation washed over her. The lace was soft against her skin, a feather-light touch before it was gone, pulled over her head and tossed aside. Now she was clad only in her delicate lace drawers, her body exposed to his hungry gaze. He took his time, his eyes sweeping over her, lingering on the gentle swell of her breasts, the curve of her waist, the soft line of her hips. She felt a blush creep up her neck, but it was not shame, it was pure, unadulterated desire. She wanted his touch, desperately, fiercely. He leaned down, his lips trailing a path of fire from her collarbone to the hollow between her breasts. His warm breath ghosted over her skin, sending shivers through her. He kissed the soft curve of her breast, then moved lower, his tongue flicking lightly over her skin, sending a jolt of pleasure through her. Ilara gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair, urging him closer, deeper. His hands moved to the waistband of his trousers, and with a quick, fluid motion, he shed them, along with his undergarments. He was magnificent, a vision of masculine power and grace, his body a testament to strength and raw beauty. Ilara's gaze devoured him, a silent gasp escaping her lips. He returned to her, his body warm and hard against hers, the soft hairs of his chest brushing against her sensitive skin. He covered her mouth with his, a deep, consuming kiss that left her breathless, light-headed. Their bodies met, skin to skin, a delicious friction that ignited 1,000 tiny fires across her skin. His legs tangled with hers, his strong thigh pressing between her own, sending a jolt of exquisite pleasure through her. She felt the undeniable hardness of him against her most sensitive core, and a desperate, aching need bloomed within her. His hand slid down her body, over her hip, then lower, his fingers gently tracing the delicate lace of her drawers. He lingered there, teasing, tormenting, building the tension to an almost unbearable pitch. Ilara arched her back, pressing herself into his touch, silently begging for more. Her fingers clawed lightly at his shoulders, her body trembling with a mixture of anticipation and yearning. "So beautiful, my Ilara," he whispered against her lips, his voice thick with desire. "So incredibly desirable." His fingers found the delicate ties of her drawers, and with a practiced ease, he undid them. The lace slipped down her legs, a final barrier removed. She was completely bare before him, vulnerable, yet utterly empowered by the intensity of his gaze, the overwhelming heat of his touch. He looked at her, truly looked at her, his eyes dark with a reverence that melted any lingering shyness. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, then lifted it to his lips, his tongue flicking a soft, warm path along her inner wrist. Elara moaned, a soft, helpless sound. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to feel every sensation. He lowered his head, his lips trailing a path down her stomach, across her hip bone, towards the most intimate part of her. Elara's breath caught in her throat, her body arching in an involuntary response. His warm breath fanned across her, sending shivers of electrifying pleasure through her. His tongue, warm and wet, teased the sensitive skin of her inner thigh, making her gasp. He moved closer, his touch light, exploratory, yet undeniably powerful. Elara whimpered, her fingers gripping the sheets, her hips instinctively lifting towards him. The pleasure was exquisite, overwhelming, unlike anything she had ever known. It was a sweet, unbearable ache that throbbed deep within her, a hunger that demanded to be sated. He continued his tender assault, his lips and tongue a masterful instrument of pleasure, driving her to the brink. She felt a profound wave building within her, a delicious current, pulling her deeper into the swirling vortex of sensation. Her body was a symphony of trembling nerves, every cell alive, screaming for more. Her mind was a dizzying blur, focused only on his touch, his scent, the intoxicating rhythm of his exploration. She was lost in the moment, a creature of pure sensation, her inhibitions long forgotten, replaced by a fierce, primal longing. Her hips began to move their own accord, a silent plea for him to deepen his exquisite torment. The air in the room was thick with their mingled desire, the soft sounds of her gasps and his low groans filling the silence. The world outside the bedroom had ceased to exist, leaving only the two of them, intertwined in a dance of burgeoning passion. She was on the precipice, teetering on the edge of an unknown abyss, ready to fall, ready to soar. And she knew with every fiber of her being that this was indeed just the beginning. He read her silent plea, a flicker of raw understanding passing between them in the dim light. His eyes dark pools of desire, locked with hers, a silent question hanging in the air. Then, with a low groan that vibrated deep in his chest, he surrendered to the undeniable pull. He shifted, a fraction of an inch, and the exquisite pressure that had been teasing her very core intensified, blossoming into a deep, aching fullness. It wasn't a plunge, not yet, but a slow, deliberate claiming, a tender invasion that stole the breath from her lungs. A soft gasp escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Her fingers, still tangled in his hair, tightened, pulling him closer, as if she could absorb him into her very being. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her temple, then her cheek, before finding the sensitive curve of her neck. He breathed her in, the scent of her skin, warm and sweet, intoxicating him further. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, a rough caress against her skin. "So beautiful." Each word was a brushstroke on her senses, igniting a deeper fire within. She felt him, every inch of him, filling her, stretching her, making her feel utterly complete. The initial shock gave way to a sublime acceptance, a feeling of coming home to a place she never knew existed. Her body, once a separate entity, now felt intrinsically linked to his, a perfect puzzle piece finding its match. He began to move, a slow, sensual sway that was more a promise than an act. His hips rotated, a gentle friction that sent shivers of delight coursing through her. She arched into him, meeting his rhythm, her own body awakening to a primal language it inherently understood. The bed beneath them groaned softly in protest, a symphony to their burgeoning passion. Her hands moved from his hair, tracing the powerful line of his shoulders, feeling the taut muscles flex under her touch. Her nails, barely perceptible, scored his skin, a testament to the intensity of her pleasure. He groaned again, a deep, guttural sound that resonated through her, a primal call and response. He looked at her then, his eyes burning with an unbridled adoration that made her heart swell. In their depths, she saw her own desire reflected, magnified, a dazzling mirror of their shared longing. He lowered his head, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and ravenous. It was a kiss that tasted of longing, of surrender, of the bittersweet joy of a connection finally forged. His tongue danced with hers, a slow, erotic ballet that mirrored the movements of their bodies below. She kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her unspoken feelings, all her pent-up desire, into the embrace. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer still, wanting to erase any last sliver of space between them. She felt the beat of his heart against her breast, a frantic drum that matched her own. He deepened the kiss, a soft growl rumbling in his throat, and the pace of their lovemaking quickened, subtly at first, then with an increasing urgency. The soft, rhythmic caress became a more insistent push and pull, a dance of give and take that left her breathless. Each thrust was a wave, building higher and higher, threatening to break over her in a glorious, shattering cascade. Her hips lifted instinctively, meeting his every powerful stroke, urging him deeper, faster. She could feel the friction, the heat, the electric current that hummed between them. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her head tossing from side to side on the pillow, her senses overwhelmed. The pleasure was so intense it bordered on pain, a sweet agony that she never wanted to end. He leaned down, his lips at her ear, his voice a ragged whisper. "Let go, love. Just let go." And she did. She released all conscious thought, all inhibition, all the carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart. There was only sensation, pure and unadulterated. Her body tightened around him, a beautiful, involuntary spasm, pulling him in even further. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of colors behind her closed eyelids, as she felt the first tremors begin. It started as a ripple, a delicate tremor deep within her, then spread like wildfire, consuming her from the inside out. Her muscles convulsed, her back arched, and a cry, raw and primal, tore from her throat. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his back, riding the crest of the wave as it crashed over her, shattering her into a million glorious pieces. He held her, his body rigid above hers, his own breath coming in ragged gasps. He stayed, still, buried deep within her, letting her ride out the powerful aftershocks, his weight a comforting anchor in the tempest. She felt his heart hammering against her, a steady rhythm that slowly brought her back to earth. As the last tremor subsided, leaving her weak and trembling, he began to move again, slow and deliberate, a new rhythm emerging from the aftermath of her release. It was a tender, almost reverent movement, a loving caress that soothed her still vibrating nerves. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose, scattering soft, tender kisses across her face. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice still hoarse, filled with concern and a deep tenderness that melted her heart. She nodded, unable to form words, her body still humming with the echoes of pleasure. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze, and saw not just desire, but a profound connection, a shared vulnerability that felt sacred. A small, contented sigh escaped her lips. He smiled, a gentle, heart-stopping smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Good," he murmured, and then, with renewed purpose, he began to move with a slow, deliberate power that promised another ascent. She felt herself responding instantly, her body already tingling, eager for more. The initial intensity had mellowed into a deep, pervasive warmth, a steady thrum that pulsed between them. This time the journey felt different. It was less about the urgent rush to the precipice, and more about savoring every delicious moment, every subtle shift in pressure, every shared breath. He leaned back slightly, allowing her to see his face, etched with a mixture of concentration and pure bliss. His eyes, though still burning, held a softer light now, filled with a tenderness that made her feel cherished. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her touch. He leaned into her caress, his eyes closing for a moment, savoring the intimacy. "You feel incredible," he whispered, his voice a husky rasp that sent shivers down her spine. "Every part of you." Her cheeks flushed with a warmth that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. His words, delivered with such sincerity, touched a deeper part of her. She tightened her grip on him, urging him closer, wanting to feel every inch of him, to absorb his strength, his presence, his very essence. Their movements became a seamless flow, a dance choreographed by instinct and desire. He would pause, holding her gaze, and she would feel the building anticipation, the exquisite ache of wanting more. Then he would resume, plunging deeper, eliciting a soft moan from her lips. The air was thick with their mingled scents, the musky aroma of arousal, the clean scent of his skin, her own sweet perfume. The sounds in the room were a symphony of passion. The soft rustle of sheets, the rhythmic creak of the bed, the wet, intimate sounds of their bodies joining, her soft gasps, his low guttural moans, the ragged cadence of their breathing. Each sound was a note in their private concert, a testament to the raw, untamed beauty of their union. He shifted his weight, supporting himself on his forearms, allowing her more freedom to move, to meet his thrusts with her own rising passion. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him in tighter, feeling the full length of him, the exquisite pressure building with each stroke. Her hips tilted, instinctively finding the angle that brought her the most profound pleasure. This time, the ascent was slower, more deliberate, a prolonged journey of building intensity. He watched her face, his gaze tracing every nuance of her expression, from the slight furrow of concentration between her brows to the soft parting of her lips, her eyes heavy-lidded with pleasure. He seemed to draw strength from her reactions, his own pleasure escalating with hers. "Look at me," he commanded softly, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She opened her eyes, hazy with desire, and met his burning gaze. In their depths, she saw a raw, beautiful vulnerability, a plea for connection that mirrored her own. It was more than just physical desire. It was a profound yearning for shared intimacy, a silent promise of something deeper. He began to whisper words against her skin, meaningless phrases that held profound meaning in their current state of heightened emotion. "My love, my heart, you are everything." Each word was a caress, a balm to her soul, an affirmation that this was not just a fleeting moment, but something significant, something powerful. She arched into him, her body trembling with a delicious anticipation. The pressure inside her was building again, a sweet, unbearable tension that threatened to overwhelm her. She felt herself spiraling upwards, faster and faster, towards another glorious release. Her nails, forgotten, lightly raked his back, leaving faint, red trails on his skin. He didn't flinch, only groaned, a sound of pure, masculine pleasure. He leaned down, his mouth finding the sensitive curve of her neck, nipping gently, then soothing the spot with his tongue. A shiver coursed through her, from the top of her head to the tips of her toes. Her senses were alight, every nerve ending vibrating with exquisite sensation. The world outside the bedroom truly had ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of their bodies, the rhythm of their breathing, the insistent push and pull of their love-making. Time had lost all meaning, dissolving into a timeless space where only their combined desires held sway. She felt the familiar tightening deep within her, the exquisite contraction that heralded the approach of another climax. This time, it felt even more profound, more connected, as if their souls were intertwining with their bodies. She gasped, her eyes wide, clinging to him as the wave began to crash over her once more. Her body convulsed, a series of powerful, involuntary spasms that drew a deep groan from his throat. He held her tight, his own movements becoming more urgent, more desperate, as he mirrored her release. She cried out, his name a guttural gasp on her lips, as she shattered into a million glorious fragments, carried away on a tide of pure, unadulterated bliss. And then, just as she was floating back down, still trembling, still buzzing with the aftershocks, she felt him. A deep, powerful shudder racked his body. He cried out her name, a raw, guttural sound torn from the depths of his being, and then, with a final deep thrust, he joined her in her descent, his body rigid, trembling, emptying himself into her. He collapsed onto her, his weight a comforting blanket, his breath coming in ragged, heaving gasps. They lay there for a long moment, intertwined, their hearts hammering against each other in a shared rhythm, the air thick with the scent of their lovemaking. She ran her fingers through his damp hair, feeling the slickness of his skin against hers. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a deep contentment she hadn't known was possible. This wasn't just physical release, it was an emotional catharsis, a coming together of two souls in a way that transcended words. He stirred, lifting his head slightly, his eyes still closed. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, then burrowed his face into the crook of her neck, his breath warm against her skin. "Remarkable," he whispered, his voice hoarse with spent passion. "Absolutely remarkable." She smiled, a soft, private smile, and tightened her arms around him. She felt utterly cherished, desired and deeply, truly seen. It was a feeling she wanted to bottle up and keep forever. After a few moments of comfortable silence, broken only by their settling breath, he shifted, carefully rolling onto his side, pulling her with him so they were still intimately connected, spooned together, his body a warm, protective cocoon around hers. He pulled the blanket up, tucking it around them both, as if shielding them from the outside world. "Cold," he murmured, his lips brushing against her hair. "No," she whispered back, her voice still a little shaky. "Perfect," he chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her. His hand found hers, intertwining their fingers, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. She leaned back into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. The moon, now high in the sky, cast long silvery shadows through the window, painting the room in shades of charcoal and silver. The world outside was quiet, asleep, but within their shared space, a vibrant new world had just been born. She thought about how quickly their evening had escalated, from tentative smiles and shared laughter to this profound, raw intimacy. It felt both impossibly fast and utterly inevitable, as if every moment of their lives had been leading them to this very spot, this very embrace. A soft sigh escaped her lips, a sigh of pure contentment. She felt utterly spent, yet completely re-energized, as if her very cells had been recalibrated. Her body still thrummed with residual pleasure, a warm, delicious ache that lingered sweetly. He began to trace patterns on her arm with his thumb, a soothing, repetitive motion that lulled her into a state of blissful relaxation. She could feel the gentle rise and fall of his chest against her back, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was a melody of peace, a lullaby that promised safety and comfort. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, his voice a soft murmur against her ear, almost a breath. "More than comfortable," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Content," he hummed in response, a sound that conveyed his own satisfaction. She could feel the gentle weight of his arm draped over her waist, his hand resting lightly on her hip, a possessive yet tender touch that made her feel safe and cherished. She closed her eyes, letting the lingering sensations wash over her. The scent of him, musky and distinctly masculine, filled her nostrils, mingling with the subtle sweetness of their shared intimacy. It was a scent that she knew, even now, would forever be etched into her memory, a potent reminder of this night. A question, unspoken, hung in the air between them. What now? This was clearly more than just a fleeting encounter. The depth of their connection, the intensity of their shared passion, had forged something undeniable, something profound. She wasn't sure what it was, or what it would become, but she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, that she wanted to explore it. She wanted to know more about him, to delve deeper into the layers of the man who had just taken her to the edge of the universe and back. She felt him shift slightly behind her, his lips brushing against the sensitive skin just behind her ear. "Sleep," he whispered, his voice warm and comforting. Rest now. But sleep felt miles away. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, replaying every exquisite touch, every whispered word, every shared gasp. She felt a lightness in her heart, a joyful effervescence that bubbled up from deep within. She reached back, her fingers finding his, intertwining them once more. His grip tightened gently, a silent reassurance. It was a promise, she felt, of continued connection, of a bond that had just begun to unfurl its magnificent petals. The quiet intimacy of the moment was profound. The world outside, with its demands and distractions, felt infinitely far away. In this bed, in his arms, she felt utterly complete, utterly present. The gentle rise and fall of his chest against her back, the warmth of his body, the soft sound of his breath, these were the only realities that mattered. She drifted, not quite asleep, but somewhere in the hazy, delicious space between wakefulness and slumber. Images flashed behind her eyelids, the intensity of his gaze, the curve of his smile, the powerful grace of his body, the way he held her, cherished her, taken her apart and put her back together again, new and whole. She thought of his hands, strong and capable, yet so tender. She thought of his lips, firm and passionate, yet so gentle. She thought of the way his voice had deepened with desire, the way he had whispered her name as if it were a sacred incantation. A faint smile touched her lips. This was indeed just the beginning. The beginning of what, she couldn't say. A romance? A passionate affair? A deeper, more enduring love? She didn't know, and in that moment, she didn't need to. All she knew was the profound, aching certainty that whatever lay ahead, it would be extraordinary. The lingering scent of their love-making still hung in the air. A sweet, musky perfume that was now intertwined with the clean freshness of the sheets. She inhaled deeply, committing it to memory. This was the scent of passion, of surrender, of two souls colliding and merging in a dance as ancient as time itself. He shifted again, pulling her even closer, as if sensing her wakefulness, or perhaps simply wanting to reaffirm their connection. His chin rested on the top of her head, his breath ruffling her hair. She felt a protective warmth envelop her, a sense of belonging that settled deep in her bones. She imagined the morning light, when it would eventually break through the curtains. How would it feel to wake up beside him, to see his face in the soft glow of dawn, to relive the memories of the night in the quiet intimacy of a new day? The thought sent a fresh wave of anticipation through her. She was no longer on the precipice, teetering. She had fallen gloriously, completely, and had been caught by him. And now she was soaring, carried aloft by a feeling that defied gravity, a feeling that promised endless possibilities. Her eyelids grew heavier, the warmth of his body a potent soporific. She felt the edges of consciousness begin to fray, pulled into the soft embrace of sleep. But even as she drifted away, her mind held on to one last thought, a silent whisper in the darkness. Thank you. Thank you for this night, for this connection, for this beautiful, exhilarating beginning. Her dreams, when they came, were filled with warmth and light, with the phantom touch of his hands, the echo of his whispers, the lingering sensation of his presence. She slept deeply, more peacefully than she had in a long time, held safe and cherished in the arms of the man who had irrevocably changed her world. The night wore on, the moon traversing its silent path across the sky. Outside, the world continued its slumber, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within the quiet confines of the bedroom. Inside, two souls, now intertwined, rested, their bodies still humming with the echoes of their shared passion, their hearts beating in a newly synchronized rhythm, ready for whatever the dawn might bring. This was not an ending, but a pause. A moment of peaceful respite before the next chapter of their unfolding story began. The first delicate tendrils of dawn, the color of bruised plums and soft rose, began to paint the eastern sky, gradually seeping through the gaps in the heavy curtains. It was a hesitant, gentle light, a stark contrast to the fierce, fiery passion that had consumed the room hours earlier. He stirred first, a languid stretch that brought his arm more firmly around her waist, pulling her closer still. Her back was pressed against his chest, Her head nestled perfectly in the hollow of his shoulder, her breath a soft, rhythmic whisper against his skin. A profound sense of peace, unlike any he had ever known, settled over him. It wasn't merely the contentment of physical satisfaction, but a deeper, more resonant quietude that hummed beneath his skin, a melody composed of shared warmth, vulnerability, and an undeniable, powerful connection. He felt her shift slightly, a small sigh escaping her lips, and then her hand, soft and warm, found his, entwining their fingers instinctively. She was waking, too, slowly, gracefully, like a flower unfurling to the morning sun. The air was cool against their exposed skin, yet the space between them was incandescent with residual heat. He felt the soft brush of her hair against his jaw, the subtle scent of her skin, a delicate blend of lavender from her pillow. The musk of desire, and something uniquely hers, something that now felt irrevocably imprinted on his senses. "Good morning," he whispered. His voice thick with sleep and emotion, a low rumble against her ear. He kissed the crown of her head, a tender, possessive gesture. She hummed in response, a sound of utter contentment that vibrated through him. She didn't move immediately, seeming to savor the moment, the cocoon of their shared warmth. Then slowly, she turned in his arms, her eyes still heavy-lidded, but alight with a soft, knowing glow. Her gaze met his, and in that silent exchange, a universe of unspoken feelings passed between them. There was surprise, wonder, a touch of lingering disbelief, but overwhelmingly, a deep, undeniable sense of rightness. "Morning," she murmured, her voice a husky whisper. Her fingers, still intertwined with his, tightened gently. She traced the line of his jaw with her free hand, her touch feather-light, exploring the planes of his face, as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps for the first time with such clarity. I don't think I've ever slept so well." He smiled, a genuine heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "Nor I, or woken up feeling quite like this." He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her temple, lingering at the corner of her eye before finally meeting her lips in a tender, unhurried kiss. It was a kiss of rediscovery, of quiet gratitude, a gentle reaffirmation of the night's profound intimacy. It lacked the urgent hunger of hours past, replaced instead by a deeper, more abiding sweetness. They lay there for a long time, simply holding each other, the silence punctuated only by their synchronized breathing and the distant chirp of early birds. The room gradually brightened, washing everything in a pearlescent glow. The world outside was indeed waking, but within their sanctuary, time seemed to stretch and bend, allowing them to exist in this suspended state of nascent bliss. Eventually the call of the day, gentle but insistent, began to intrude. A sliver of golden light, bolder than the rest, pierced through the curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and casting a warm glow on their entangled limbs. "Are you hungry?" she asked, her voice still soft, but with a hint of practicality returning. He chuckled, famished. "For coffee, for breakfast, for more of you." His gaze was warm, playful, yet undeniably serious in its depth. She blushed, a soft rose spreading across her cheeks, and a small delighted laugh escaped her. "Let's start with coffee, shall we? I make a rather good cup." Reluctantly they untangled themselves, the cool air momentarily shocking their skin, making them instinctively reach for each other again. A fleeting touch of fingers, a brush of shoulders, as if to reassure themselves the other was still there, still real. He watched her as she moved, pulling on a silk robe that had been draped over a chair, its fabric shimmering in the morning light. There was a new grace to her movements, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before, or perhaps he just hadn't noticed it with such clarity. He found his own clothes, pulling on a pair of comfortable trousers, leaving his chest bare. He followed her out of the bedroom, the scent of fresh coffee already beginning to waft from the kitchen. The house, which had felt so empty and quiet when he had first arrived, now hummed with a different kind of energy, a shared warmth that seemed to infuse every corner. In the kitchen, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating a vibrant vase of sunflowers on the counter. She moved with a familiar ease, grinding beans, filling the coffee maker, her movements fluid and unhurried. He leaned against the doorframe, simply watching her, a quiet contentment settling deep within him. "You know," he began, breaking the comfortable silence, "last night, it wasn't just physical for me." He pushed off the doorframe, walking closer, standing behind her as she poured the steaming coffee into 2 mugs. He rested his hands lightly on her waist, his chin hooking over her shoulder. She paused, her movements still, her hand hovering over the second mug. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't for me either." She turned in his embrace, her eyes searching his. I haven't felt like that in a very long time, or perhaps ever." "Me neither," he admitted, his voice raw with sincerity. "It was overwhelming, like coming home to a place I didn't even know I was searching for." Her eyes softened, shimmering with unshed emotion. "Yes," she breathed, "exactly that." She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, her touch sending shivers down his spine. "I've been so guarded, so careful, and then you just broke through it all. Not with force, but with something so gentle, so true, that I couldn't resist, didn't want to resist." "I felt it too," he confessed. "That pull, from the moment we met. It was like the world tilted on its axis, and suddenly, everything made sense, or rather everything that didn't make sense before, suddenly felt irrelevant." He paused, his thumb gently caressing her hip. "What does this mean for us?" The question hung in the air, delicate and fragile, yet brimming with hope. She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to their intertwined hands, then back up to meet his. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I want to find out." Her voice gained strength, conviction. "I want to explore it, every facet of it. I want to see where this takes us." A wave of relief washed over him, profound and exhilarating. He pulled her closer, pressing a fervent kiss to her lips, a kiss that held a promise, a burgeoning future. "Me too," he murmured against her mouth. "More than anything, me too." They spent the next few hours in a languid dance of intimacy and discovery. They sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, sharing stories, laughter bubbling up easily between them. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, their fears, peeling back layers with each shared glance, each lingering touch. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by comfortable silences and soft smiles. He learned about her passion for gardening, the way she found solace in nurturing life, and how her quiet demeanor masked a fierce independence and a profound well of empathy. She discovered his love for old books, his adventurous spirit that belied his calm exterior, and the deep, unwavering loyalty he held for those he cared about. Each revelation, small or large, only deepened the connection that had been forged in the crucible of the night. As the morning progressed, they moved from the kitchen to the sun-drenched living room. He watched her as she picked up a book, her brow furrowed in concentration as she found her place, a strand of hair falling across her face. He felt an urge to reach out and tuck it behind her ear, a simple gesture that now felt loaded with meaning. He realized he was falling for her, not just for the captivating woman she was in the throes of passion, but for the quiet, thoughtful, intelligent woman who read poetry on a Sunday morning. "What are you reading?" he asked, his voice soft. She looked up, a faint blush again gracing her cheeks. "Just some old poetry. Rilke, it's surprisingly relevant this morning." She closed the book, setting it aside, her gaze meeting his, open and vulnerable. "It feels like a new chapter, doesn't it? Everything." "It does," he agreed, moving to sit beside her on the plush sofa. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers once more. "And I want to write that chapter with you." Her thumb gently caressed the back of his hand. "There's a part of me that's terrified," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Terrified of how quickly this happened, how deeply I feel already. It's overwhelming." "I understand," he said, his voice reassuring. I feel it too. It's powerful. But sometimes when something feels this right, you have to lean into it. Trust it. He squeezed her hand gently. We can take it slow, if that's what you need, but I don't want to let you go. She looked at him, her eyes searching his, and found only sincerity, a profound depth of feeling that mirrored her own. A small, hopeful smile bloomed on her lips. No, she said, her voice firm, I don't want to go slow. I want to dive in, with you. He leaned in, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and fiercely possessive. It was a kiss of commitment, of newfound courage. A silent vow to explore this uncharted territory together. The world outside might be moving at its usual frantic pace, but in their shared space, time slowed, bending to the rhythm of their beating hearts. They decided to spend the day together, letting the unfolding hours dictate their actions. They took a leisurely walk through a nearby park, hand in hand, the crisp autumn air invigorating them. The vibrant colors of the changing leaves seemed to reflect the new vibrancy in their own lives. They talked about mundane things, about their favorite seasons, their childhood memories, slowly weaving the tapestry of their individual lives into a shared narrative. Later, they prepared lunch together. A simple meal that felt gourmet because it was made with shared laughter and stolen kisses. He watched her chop vegetables, her movements precise and graceful, and she watched him effortlessly season the food, his touch confident and practiced. Every shared task, every glance, every touch, deepened the bond that had been forged in the quiet intensity of the night. As the afternoon began to wane, casting long, golden shadows across the room, they found themselves back on the sofa, nestled close, his arm around her, her head resting on his shoulder. The silence between them was no longer tentative but comfortable, filled with the warmth of unspoken understanding. I feel like I've known you forever, she murmured, her voice soft with contentment. And I you, he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. It's like all the pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was working on, suddenly clicked into place. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that this was just the beginning. The dawn had brought not an ending, but a glorious, radiant new beginning. The next chapter of their story was not merely starting. It was already being written, page by page, moment by moment, with every beat of their newly synchronized heart. As twilight began to settle, painting the sky in hues of lavender and deep indigo, he looked at her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp. There was a peaceful contentment in her eyes, a quiet joy that mirrored his own. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that he wanted to wake up beside her tomorrow, and the day after that, and for all the days to come. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers, a promise in the touch. Stay with me tonight, he whispered, his voice a tender plea. She didn't hesitate, her eyes shining with unwavering affection. Always, she replied, her voice firm, resolute. And as the moon began its silent ascent, casting its gentle light upon the quiet house, two souls, now irrevocably intertwined, settled into the comfortable embrace of their shared sanctuary. The echoes of their shared passion still hummed in the air, but now it was overlaid with the soft, steady rhythm of a love that had found its home, ready to face whatever new dawn might bring, together. This was not an ending, but a beautiful, profound beginning, a tapestry of two lives woven into one, ready to unfold into an endless, passionate story.